In this module, we are going to continue looking at learning theories. We've already covered behaviorism, and now we're going to look at two additional learning theories, the social cognitive theory and the constructivist theory. And the people that you see listed there all fit into one of those different learning theories. So just to review, in the behaviorist theory, the idea is learning is a behavioral change that results from stimuli and you developing a response that is rewarded or reinforced to that specific stimuli. Social cognitive theory goes and looks at many more variables that affect how people learn. And if you think about social meaning interaction, and cognitive obviously using the brain to think and process. And you see here a picture of Albert Bandura, who's really considered the creator of social cognitive theory. He did a very famous experiment with Bobo dolls to show the importance of how children mimic and are observing adults and then will often react the way the adults do. And you'll see a video clip of that in this week's presentation. So let's look at the underlying principles of the social cognitive theory. The first is that people learn by observing others, and this is critical. Behaviorists don't really look at the whole social element at all. Also, in this theory, learning is internal. So it's the individual processing, reflecting on what they've learned from a certain situation, and it may result in them changing their behavior or it may not. Remember, behaviorists say to learn is to change your behavior, and social cognitive theorists say not necessarily so. Behavior is directed toward a particular goal. It could be towards pleasing somebody. It could be towards developing a new skill. But it's really driven by each individual and their own motivation. Behavior eventually becomes self-regulated. So whereas we might need a lot of reinforcement at the beginning, eventually we internalize, oh, this is the right thing to do. This is the socially accepted thing to do. And reinforcement and punishment have a role in learning, but it doesn't mean that it's what totally is controlling learning and behavior. There can be many more motivations for somebody to behave the way they do. So in other words, look at this triangle. And what Bandura is saying is that we have three very different variables that affect somebody's motivation, their willingness to learn, and their eventual learning. And one of those is behavioral factors, so how they're acting. One is the environmental factors, so what are they seeing in their environment, what's getting reinforced, what's not, and personal factors, their own, who they are as an individual. And what the social cognitive theorists believe is all three of these sets of factors are interacting and are creating how a student or how a person learns and grows and makes progress. And along with these three interactive sets of variables, Bandura really focuses in on the importance of models. So models provide guidance, instruction, feedback. Also, how we help people develop their goals and their sense of efficacy in terms of if they feel confident in themselves, and how these two things then lead to each individual to be motivated to learn, to set learning goals for themselves, and their eventual learning. So let's look at these ideas, these concepts a little bit more in depth. So we're going to talk about models because this is huge in the social cognitive theory. And we're going to look at those three questions that are listed right there. So the definition of a model, according to Bandura, is somebody who is either a live person or was alive at one time, or it could be somebody symbolic, such as a character that you identify with in a book or in a movie. Right? How many of us have emulated a character that we've seen on TV? A live model, a teacher, a parent, a sibling, a peer, a coach, anybody like that. And these are people who we want to emulate, or people who model ways to behave. And I put two samples there from my own life. My parents over there in one corner, who modeled for me throughout my whole childhood and into adulthood what it means to care, what it means to go the extra mile for somebody. And then I put one of my favorite books growing up, Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry. And I really identified with the main character of the girl of Cassie, and how she spoke up about injustices against African American people in the South after slavery was over, but there still was so much discrimination and segregation. And I always thought, I need to speak up for those who are underrepresented. So she became a symbolic model for me in my life. Now, remember, I'm giving you two models who, for me, have modeled great things for me. Sometimes we have people who the models they have in their life are modeling things that we would not consider to be appropriate behavior. But models have extreme power over people. So if you have a child who's growing up in a home where there is physical violence, but that child looks up to his father or mother, whoever is doing the violence, then that child is most likely to emulate and repeat that type of behavior. So models aren't always necessarily a positive. When we look at the impact that models can have on learners, one is the learner learns by observing. So think about your parents when you were first learning how to ride a bike. They walked you through it step by step. Maybe they got on a bike to show you how to pedal. You were learning by them demonstrating the steps. Maybe one of your parents taught you how to cook. They taught you how to throw a football. All of those things would be things you learned by observation. A teacher taught you how to print your name, right? Those types of things. The other thing that models do is that if the model reinforces the behavior that the learner is demonstrating, then the learner is more likely to continue to repeat that behavior. So this is similar to what the behaviorists say, right? Reinforcement leads to that behavior being more likely to occur again. Also, though, they can inhibit that response after they see a model punished for that behavior. So, for example, if you have a student or an older sibling maybe who's punished for burping out loud or for using swear words, then the learner might be like, oh, okay, I don't want to do that. So they're learning based on how they see their models being treated. So think about the people they look up to, right? If they're punished for that behavior, then the learner's like, oh, okay, I'm not going to follow in that same trap. And lastly, we call it response disinhibition if there's a behavior that they've been told they're not supposed to do, or they've been punished for it before. But if they see the model exhibit that behavior without any negative consequences, then they're like, oh, okay, well, maybe I can do that too. So, for example, if they see, let's go back to the older sibling, steal some candy from a store, and they're not punished, they're not caught, they will tend to think, oh, well, then I can get away with that too, even though maybe other people have told me that I'm not supposed to. So, models in the social cognitive theory are extremely important.